beginning, I just want to start by saying how much I've enjoyed listening to and learning with you all, and I feel very humble about what I've got to say, but very much look forward to unpicking it with you. And it starts with a question about how the evidence about the nature of an environment for teacher professional learning can help us construct a dynamic future for the profession within the context that Gordana and John have said and the other presentations have. And in particular, I want to think about in detail the specifics of teacher professional learning's contribution to rising to the challenges so eloquently put in John's wonderful paper and the other presentations we've had. It connects with Dirk's point about knowledge, but I'm kind of trying to push us beyond knowledge into learning. And I want to say we do have a very mature and established evidence base about the nature, first of all, of professional development. And this comes from very careful, systematic reviews. And I want to just notice that the first funder of these large-scale systematic reviews was actually a teacher professional association. It was the National Union of Teachers under John's leadership. And in this country, other professional associations, particularly the General Teaching Council, with a slightly different body, started to fund that. Government came on the scene later. The New Zealand government also helped. So we have a series of very large-scale, technical, all carried out double-blind, systematic, large-scale reviews of the international evidence about what makes the difference in teachers' professional development learning, not just to the teachers, but to young people. And most recently, we have a more fine-grained review that looks specifically at the role of teachers engaging with their own and in their own research and with the research of other people in teaching as compared to health and social services. And actually, the story about health is not the one you'd expect, so interesting things there. I'm saying we've got an evidence base, and I want to just rehearse it to remind us about this, because I think there are some paradoxes we can make use of. First of all, whenever we've got large-scale evidence about benefits for teachers and for young people, we always have evidence about the drawing down by teachers of specialist expertise. And that specialist expertise functions in several different ways. First of all, teachers are using specialists to be sure they're identifying high leverage strategies, but also to match those, and to learn how to evaluate and match those to the needs of the young people they're working with. Specialists are important in helping teachers to see the art of the possible, to see new approaches and phenomena in action in various different contexts and different modes. Specialists are helping teachers in providing feedback about their early experiments, but the form of feedback is very important, and people like Bruce Joyce now challenge the notion of feedback and talk about debriefing instead. And the other thing specialists are skilled at, and that teachers are looking for from the specialists who work with them, is skills in making themselves redundant and in building the teacher's own control over their own learning in a gradual scaffolding process. But what we also have in the evidence, and there is much more evidence about this and evidence of needing more of it, is teacher-peer learning. And again, we're beginning to be able to theorize and understand some principles underneath that, as well as have large-scale empirical evidence about why this is important. Particularly key is teachers using each other to sustain the momentum in prodding and poking and refining what they've learned from specialists in day-to-day contexts. And above all, reciprocal vulnerability. Reciprocal vulnerability between teachers lengthens our arms in learning. Because when teachers take the risk of looking silly together in trying out new things and unlearning things, they become committed to supporting each other. And you see this time and again in the evidence. Reciprocal vulnerability is fantastic at speeding up the trust needed to unlearn and learn with authenticity and to try very new things. And we also know that peer support is key and linked to ownership of professional learning amongst conscripts just as much as natural enthusiasts or even convertible skeptics. We know there are a whole series of other things here. Professional dialogue, this is not any kind of conversation. We see it linked in particular to two things. We see it as dialogue about trying out new things, disturbing the status quo. We see it also as being very importantly linked to working out not just how things work, or that they work, or don't work, but to understanding why they do and don't in different contexts. Actually, practical theory underpinning rationale is a hugely central part of effective professional dialogue. It follows, therefore, that you get inquiry-oriented learning, learning to learn from observing. We have in this country a plethora, an enormous amount of learning walks. Some of it, frankly, is casual tourism, and the learning is not great or deep. Some of it is very powerful, and very often the difference between those two is the extent to which teachers get the opportunity to learn how to learn from looking. That too is a skill. And the other thing we see in all this evidence is tools. Now, this kind of CPD, the first thing anybody does is give it a smart name. And, you know, sometimes it's collaborative inquiry, sometimes it's coaching, tutoring, conferencing. Broadly, it tends to come under umbrellas of mixtures of coaching, specialist coaching and peer coaching, mentoring, collaborative inquiry, and co-construction. In English, we have a saying that what is sauce for the goose is sauce for the gander. What I think we have here is the same situation for teachers that we were in 10 years ago about the learning of pupils. We spent far too much time looking at the teaching of young people and not enough looking at their learning. In the last 10 years, thanks to people like the National Union of Teachers starting this work on reviewing the literature, we've learned to concentrate more effectively on the CPD for teachers. But at our peril do we leave that there as being about the teaching of teachers. What we need to concentrate on is what the nature of professional learning looks like. If we can make professional learning a key priority for everyone who seeks to make a viable future for teachers, then I think we're getting somewhere in rising to some of the challenges. And there's a little booklet on our website called Sauce for the Goose, and it's got a very good recipe for sauce for goose in it, actually, and it works very well with duck as well. Okay, so we have an evidence base about teacher professional learning. One of the things we found in this, I just want to issue a warning, we were asked to translate this into a national framework for mentoring and coaching, and we identified the skills of teachers in making good uses of their coach and mentors as much as the skills of coaches. But when we interviewed teachers after they'd been coached, they were full of praise for the coach. They were almost silent on what they brought to the learning, and actually what they brought to the learning was infinitely greater and richer than the support from the coach, however good that was. So one of the things we're starting to do now is find national tools and frameworks so that we put power in teachers' hands so they interrogate their coaches, that they ask open questions when they don't know what they don't know, and closed ones when they want to signal to their coach they're taking control of their own learning and to direct the coach's attention. So if we were to use this evidence to form the future of a profession as one of a series of key priorities, what would leaders be doing? Fortunately, we have another large-scale systematic review to help us here. I don't know how many of you are aware of Vivian Robinson's best evidence synthesis on leadership. Some, not everyone. Okay, I'll quickly go into that. Correlations about the most effective contributions of school leadership. There are the 5 things that she found correlating. I've worked with over 2,000 school leaders in this country and in Italy, and asked school leaders to identify what was the most effective contribution that the school leaders were making and put them in ranking order. 3 people got it right. Actually, it's investing in promoting and participating in teacher learning that has twice the effect of any other contribution. This is a really powerful part of what we need to understand to make a future for a profession that has professional learning at its center. And then the last part of this piece is to think about what that means about schools as creating the conditions for professional learning that create the dynamic future we're all looking for. And one of the things we're beginning to see is that we need to think about effective learning environments for staff as well as for pupils, as exploring a series of dimensions. We need to understand the ways in which schools are good at recognizing, identifying, and drawing through specialist expertise amongst their own staff and from outside. We need to understand the way schools approach collaboration as a learning strategy, not just for young people, but for the professionals within it. And I thought Gordana's wonderful telling example about learning through collaboratively in partnership with parents and the wider community too. We need to understand the ways in which schools use not just pupil outcome data, but rich evidence about pupil learning and the learning process of teachers and pupils through videos. I thought Ron's example had something very powerful to offer us earlier. How schools are using evidence to enrich and sustain and embed learning. How schools, in effect, offer assessment for learning as a learning tool for teachers in the same way that they do for pupils. And the final point there is about the leadership of professional learning and development, the way leaders model, invest in, align school and individual needs, link pupil and staff learning, and select and structure tools in order to embed that. I think if we put everything we know about pupil learning, turn it through a few degrees to apply it to schools, if school leaders started to think, as Helen Timperley says, about the staff as their class, we could make quite a lot of progress quite quickly. Thank you.